Chapter 1831. Duels. Lotus happily entered the ring so that she didn't have to watch Ophelia's fight live, and waited for the warrior to enter the arena with her. The man had been reborn, so he was still working on rebuilding his skill tree, but he had quite a wide selection of skills from before he was reset into the body of a 15-year-old. He was far from the youngest, but he was gangly, awkward, pimple-faced, and his sister had been spreading vicious rumors about him. He had definitely had it the worst of anyone who was reborn. At least the ones who were fully regressed to child-sized got some sympathy points from the rest of the clan. An angry teenager got none. I'm sure that you both know the rules already, as the clan leader brought you here. No summons, no bonded assistance, no outside help, no deliberately aiming at the genitals, the referee announced. That last part was new. Lotus didn't remember hearing that was part of the ruling, and normally it would put her at a disadvantage, as that was close to shoulder height for her, with so many tall men around. But it didn't matter. This guy wasn't fully grown, and she wasn't going to punch him anyhow. Start. Lotus immediately transformed into the Tree of Life and began summoning, entangling vines, to grab her opponent. The warrior countered with Field of Blades, tearing apart the vines as fast as they were sprouting, but Lotus was not a simple opponent to fight. The vines exploded in a paralytic toxin every time that they were damaged, and she had poison damage on a few pieces of her gear. The logic was that if she had to fight, they would take continual damage to offset enemy healing, while the majority of her skills were intended to buff her healing skills. Lotus added Circle of Wrath, a holy element area damage skill to the mix, and the warrior's health began to steadily drop, even as her own stayed completely full. It was a brutal war of attrition, and her opponent couldn't afford a single misstep because her vines would sedate him if he did. In the crowd, a few of the regressed clan members laughed. That spell, the green dragons use it to hold down and sedate unruly patients. She's turned it into a primary combat skill, and her regeneration is so high that even his Field of Blades isn't hurting her. Carl smiled as he heard their admiration. Field of Blades was a physical damage spell, literally just blades cutting at everything in the range. Simple, brutal, and effective. Unless your opponent was bonded to a spirit bear tyrant, that was. Then, Lotus remembered that she had a second partner now, which meant that she had a new skill. Chain lightning arced from her branches, adding more damage to the mix, and causing her opponent to stumble. He was scratched by a thorn that tore through the joint of his armor and began to slow, giving Lotus even more chances to attack. Lightning slowed and stunned, while her vine sedated, and within a minute, her opponent was barely mobile, with a vine wrapped around his ankles. However, he had bestial regeneration, and Lotus had truly terrible spell damage. She still only had him at half health. The crowd didn't care. Getting to watch a healer fight in the arena was a rare thing, as nobody would normally ever challenge them and risk making an enemy out of a healer. Only those who had to restart as children instead of spending years rebuilding their damaged immortal spirit could possibly understand the suffering that they were put through in the minds of those who had undergone the treatment. A flurry of blades continued to clash with the vines, while arcs of bright white energy blocked the lighting strikes. The battle was turning into a furious duel that would make any combat class proud, but the actual damage level was so laughably low that more than one of the immortals had to check to make sure that Lotus wasn't still a student. Comparing the two battles, the one between the healing tree and the warrior was definitely the flashier. However, the other was definitely messier. With rapid regeneration and long claws, the two berserkers had turned the battlefield into a storm of flying blood and fur. The challenger had far superior damage and agility, but Ophelia's regeneration and pure durability was making the fight a questionable outcome. Those watching had a pretty good idea where she would rank on the charts for the spirit immortals, but in a duel, she ranked among the elite tanks. Nearly impossible to take down. Not that either berserker cared. The fact that their opponents were not easy to defeat was exactly the outcome that they had hoped for. Forfeit. Forfeit. The warrior fighting Lotus began to frantically shout as his friends burst into laughter. Lotus' tentacles had managed to breach his armor, and apparently he was not a fan of where they were headed, so he called the fight before things could get really bad on his end. It was probably the right call. Lotus had a history of traumatizing the boys. The warrior scrambled out of the arena as soon as Lotus retracted her vines, and then the priestess transformed back and pulled Tifa from her space to spin the bear around in a victory dance. She has a spirit bear as a pet? Damn, the Beast Master class is just broken. No wonder she's so tough. Ranger-type classes all get bonuses from their partners, and the Beast Masters can bond proper monsters. With that sort of advantage and her healing skills, he never stood a chance. Though, how bad were her combat skills before? Like, she's got absolutely zero buffs to her damage. It's like she's still a newly anointed acolyte. Or does her usual group have so much damage that she never needed to learn other skills? Another warrior asked. Well, she's in the Darklight host. So, wouldn't that mean that she's likely part of Carl and Dana's usual group? They came from a mortal world, and Lotus just reached immortality. So, she was likely part of their team as she advanced, and relied on the massive damage that the two of them could output. Well, that makes sense. With a team like that and a gigantic Werbear Berserker as your tank, damage is much less important than crowd control. Chapter 1832. That last. They're going to have to force those Berserkers to stop fighting when the timer runs out. That should be entertaining. A mage in the bleachers near Dana joked. The girl next to her laughed. Should we take wagers on whether one elder will be enough, or whether they'll have to send in a second one to make them realize that it's not a three-way fight now? The mage seriously considered that. Getting Berserkers to stop fighting was a tricky matter. They tended to get lost in the frenzy, and even if you try to stop them, they would be so lost that they would think that you just wanted to join the fight. Eventually, Elder for Sham blew the whistle to end the fight. And, as predicted, neither Berserker paid it any mind. They just kept fighting as they had been before. However, for Sham was not a new elder, and he regularly refereed the matches, so he had developed a technique for it. He placed barriers over both of them, separating the combatants, and then had one of the bards use a calming skill to break their enraged state. That was enough for them to realize that someone wanted their attention, and both Berserkers turned to the referee's stand. Your time is up. Get off the sands so we can clean up and get the next fight going. In unison, the Berserkers sighed sadly, and the crowd cheered for them.
If you went full-time, the fight was a draw.
It was obvious that both were holding back and that the challenger was significantly more powerful. But they sure did look pleased with themselves. Ophelia transformed back into Werbear form and held out her arms, as Lotus used, entangling vines, to transport herself over the bleachers and into Ophelia's arms. The other Berserker laughed as the tiny cleric landed in the Werbear's embrace. Ophelia was clearly showing the crowd that she was spoken for, so that they didn't hit on the Werbear with the most lovely brown fur. But that would backfire. Immortal men tended to be incredibly shameless. If there was a chance to hit on the Werbear and the cute priestess at the same time, more than one of them would be willing to give it a shot. Even if the odds were 1 in a million, they would just ask 1,000,000 times. Just maybe not today. Today, they were worried about what the priestess might do to them with those vines if she agreed. For a crafting guild, the Darklight host members are kind of scary. Do you think that the Berserker got so strong to keep people from stealing her girlfriend? The mage beside Dana whispered to her friend. Dana laughed, and the girl realized that she was talking about the people sitting right beside her. Sorry, I didn't realize. No worries. But it's actually the other way around. The Beast Master used to be a green dragon priestess, and not everyone can handle that level of crazy. So, it was Ophelia that constantly got hit on. I think that she got strong hoping that it would scare the men away. Did it work? No, not at all. Even when she's got Lotus with her, people still try to hit on the Werbear. I swear, half these warriors would have made great green dragon clerics the way that they go after the fluffy bear. The mage giggled and gestured to the elders across the arena from them. Do you not have your recruiters with the group? Dana shook her head. No, we weren't actively planning to recruit this time because we're still getting our new branch set up. So, we will start next year. Do you guys have a shop here in town? I've got some coin. We have a portal to our shop, as our guild house is further northwest of the coast. But if there's something particular you'd like, I can grab it directly for you. The young mage smiled. I have 5 fire element and 2 ice element elemental stones I collected, plus some coin. What do you have for a necklace that will help an arcane mage? Dana checked the guild store and brought out a rare grade necklace that added a load of spell damage and mana regeneration. It was a rare grade item, the sort that most of the sects were buying as bribes for recruits.
How about this?
3 fire element stones of good immortal rank quality. No flaws or cracks. The mage picked out 3 stones, and Dana handed her the necklace. Pleasure doing business. Oh, this is wonderful. The extra mana regeneration is just what I needed. Arcane magic tends to be heavy on the mana use, especially if I use a magic missile barrage. Even the fastest of warriors can't parry 50 missiles, and they'll shatter nearly any skill barrier near my level. But it's so hard on the mana pool. Dana nodded. I know that feeling. Arcane missiles were one of my earliest spells. Oh, what direction did you go after that? Direct to Golem Mage? Dana shook her head. It took me a while to obtain the Golem spell. I went for Fog as my second spell. That way, I could obscure the battlefield and attack without being spotted from so far away. If the warriors can't see you, they won't chase you. The young mage nodded eagerly. Oh, that's a great spell. A shame that it won't work well in the arena, being so close together, but when wandering the wilderness, it can be amazing. The mage's friend smiled at Carl as the 2 mages went off on a magic-related tangent. I don't suppose that you'd be willing to open the shop for me as well? I could really use a new sword. I got robbed on the way here, and they left me just an uncommon grade blade as a joke. You didn't hold back anything in inventory? The paladin laughed. You say that as if everyone just has spare gear. I was fighting a salamander when they ambushed me and hit me with paralysis. They made me trade everything on me for my life, using a blood contract. Carl frowned. I don't know that practice. What does it do? The paladin frowned. Everyone knew the blood contract. It enforces an agreement, using the system. I agree to turn over my gear, they agree not to harm me or deliberately let me be harmed for 1 week. Enough time to get to safety. It's how a lot of the clans do it these days, though some are stingy and will only give you a few hours. Chapter 1833. The Blood Oath. The man on the other side of the unfortunate paladin handed a piece of paper to Carl. It's actually really easy to use the blood contract, since it's not a magical item. I carry a couple of copies on me. You just sign it with your blood, and have the target sign it with theirs. The clans view it as the peaceful option as it guarantees that the victorious side won't continue to seek vengeance on you, and the contract says that they're willing to swear an oath on it. So, while it doesn't stop the robberies and assaults, it does keep them from escalating too far. If either side attacks, the contract will cause backlash on them, so neither side can seek vengeance for some time. And it counts asking others to do it for you as an attack on your part. That's the genius of doing it through the system. It guarantees that the victim can't call their elders over to turn you into pace the moment that you spare their lives. And that explained why it was both widely used and widely hated. Once you were forced to sign, you had to swallow your hatred for a period of time and just accept that you'd been robbed. It was basically adding insult to injury. Now that Carl thought about it, those agreements could be the source of most of the tense relationships between groups. If they were waiting for a timer to run out, it would explain why they were all somewhat getting along, despite not getting along. It would also explain some of the reason why so many disciples were attacked on their way here. Just disciples of the other clans, when normally they would attack any immortal they found wandering the wilderness without protection. If they were headed to the recruitment, they were looking to bring in members, and that meant maintaining some sort of decent reputation. If they went attacking recruit candidates, who were almost all young and newly adult immortals, they would get a reputation for preying on the weak that would discourage any of the new immortals from joining them, for fear of being turned into a slave for the sect or a training tool for the older disciples. There was a lot that went into maintaining a clan when they were all more than a little sketchy. In Carl's mind, that was one of the greatest advantages that the Darklight host had. They were questionable in many ways, but they were not a sketchy group or treacherous. If you made an agreement, they stuck to it. The trick was making a good agreement with them when they had the World Dragon on their side. Carl read through the agreement and found that it really was a simple and open document, agreeing that you wouldn't seek retribution, lead the other into harm, or take actions that would cause injury or death. That was why they had left the paladin a crappy spare sword. If they hadn't, then he would certainly have been in immense danger between where he was ambushed and the new home compound. Enough that the system was likely to call it deliberately causing him to be severely injured or killed. They weren't going to escort him to safety, that was for certain. So they left him a weapon and called it good enough. Do your groups have someone up in the sparring arena soon? We only had a couple new members join us this time, and they've both finished their fights, so we're just relaxing now. We're not a large enough guild to need to take in more than a few people a year, Carl explained. None directly. We haven't finalized any, so we're here to watch the fights, and then we will judge by their displayed skills whether they're a good fit for our sect. It's not so much about whether they win or lose, but how they handle themselves and what skills they already show an affinity for. Take the Berserkers, for example. Both of them are earth magic users, which doesn't suit our technique. But we also don't specialize in Berserker-style combat. So, while they're incredible fighters, we wouldn't try to recruit them, as it would only lead to headaches on both sides. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. We don't really have one defining sort of combat style, much like the New Home clan. We just kind of go with the flow and form nice balance groups, then teach them a trade skill so that they're not living off free cupcakes. The men nodded, pretending that the reference made any sense at all to them. Kara, feeling generous, as the paladin's story checked out, decided to explain. She held up 2 chocolate cupcakes, topped with green frosting and chocolate chips. Then, she handed them to the 2 closest immortals and sat down, as they frowned at the food in their hands. Free cupcakes. They're made with the mystic cooking skill, so they not only reduce hunger, but they also give a small magical buff. For someone with nothing else, they're a real blessing. The paladin shrugged and took a bite. He hadn't gotten a good meal in a while now, since he was short on cash and out of gear. But the cupcake would have been welcome at any time. From behind them, Carl heard a cheer and saw that Swag was also holding up a cupcake in victory. His luck was back on track. That was 2 in 2 days. Now that he had his flow of lucky cupcakes again, he was confident that his next outing would be a successful one. And, with that luck on his side, he didn't hesitate to get his team together to head out adventuring. They had only been back a day from a gathering trip, but he got cupcakes 2 days in a row, and that had to be a divine sign that he was supposed to use this chance to build up his wealth. Chapter 1834. What Lotus Wants. Carl watched the next match as Dana and the mage beside her happily chatted, and then Lotus inevitably got bored and dragged her to her feet. Sorry to interrupt. We need to go do a thing. The mage laughed. All right. Welcome to the clan, young beast master. You did well, and your daughters are adorable. Lotus smiled and bobbed her head rapidly in agreement. Right? They're absolutely perfect. As if to make the point, Tifa stood on her hind legs and nuzzled Lotus' face, which made the mage laugh. It's like the system just found you the perfect class. What skill is that? Oh, it's not a skill. It's the rare drop from the Spirit Bear Tyrant Dungeon. Tifa is a Spirit Bear cub, an actual daughter, not an active skill. Tifa nodded in agreement. The Carl found me and brought me to Mama Lotus. Tifa announced, shocking everyone. They didn't realize that the bear could speak. Ophelia ruffled the bear's fur, and Tifa held up her arms to be carried. It was so similar to the motion that Lotus used when she wanted to be carried that there was no doubt where the bear learned it. Fine, but next time, you can walk on your own. You know that you're faster than Lotus is. You're not saving time by getting carried. Then she jumped down from the bleachers to exit the arena and get away from the packed crowds watching the fights. Wait for me, I've got little legs. Carl picked Lotus and Dana up, one on each arm, and simply flew off over the top of the arena to join Ophelia outside. Oh, right. I could have transformed and flown away. Dana laughed and shook her head. Only if you wanted them to treat you like a toddler forever. Did you forget how small your dragon form is?
Right.
That could be bad. Nobody takes me seriously to begin with. It's not easy being short, I tell you. Carl set the ladies down to temper the number of envious glares that he was getting. However, the envious glares that he was getting were nothing compared to the ones that Ophelia was getting. It seemed that most of the visitors to the clan had assumed that Tifa was her actual biological daughter. Many were-bear cubs stayed in bear form until they were a few years old, and while Tifa was large, most of them had seen Ophelia's bear form. They knew that she was not a small species of bear. For a change, it actually meant that there was nobody coming up to hit on Ophelia while she was in town. That was a win in her book, even if it was partially because everyone assumed that there was a berserker-loving husband around somewhere. If he could survive Ophelia in a bad mood, he was almost guaranteed to be both very scary and very possessive. That's how it always went. Unless he was the sort that liked to be bullied, but the immortal gentleman preferred to quietly pretend that sort of man didn't exist. Lotus took the lead, and Ophelia fell in behind her, with the rest of the group wondering whether they were going for snacks or just exploring the city. Lotus and Ophelia hadn't gotten a chance to really see the place yet. "All right, we're going exploring. What is there to see?" "I heard that there is a shopping district, and there are so many new things to see here," Lotus finally insisted. "Oh, that is perfect. Right this way, ladies. Allow me to be your tour guide for the day." Dana laughed as he looped his arm through hers and began to lead the group through the streets with his best tour guide voice. Such a good tour guide voice, in fact, that others began to join their group, thinking that Carl was a legitimate service that the new home merchant clan was offering to guests and visitors. He was the only one other than Dana that had the clan tag turned on, and none of them knew Kara, as they were visitors. So, it seemed logical that he was an actual tour guide, showing off the highlights of the city. "Excuse me, sir. Is there a clothing shop here that sells and modifies leather armor?" a passerby asked. "In fact, there is," Carl replied, checking with Ray first. "There is one 3 blocks down, and then a block to your right. There is also one behind us that does alterations to leather, but they do not specialize in armor. Alternatively, you can utilize the portal in the park 4 blocks to your left, and check out the Darklight Silk Emporium in the Darklight Host Guild Village, formerly the Hyperion sex location. The portal is open full-time during the event, so you may come and go freely." The visitor smiled as Carl openly plugged his own faction shop, though it was not in the city. If you could get to it through a free portal, that was close enough for most people. But they would check the local shops first. "Thank you." The visitor wandered off to the first shop that he had mentioned, and another guest, a teenage boy with shockingly orange hair, darted forward to take her place. "Sir, might I ask if you know where I can find a room? I arrived much too late, and even the campsites are full." Carl checked the guild chat, hoping for some sort of information on the topic. I see here that there are still a few members renting hostel-style bunks. If you go left to the portal, then west down the street to the large bulletin board, you'll find the listing and a contact person on duty who can arrange a hostel room." "Thank you so much." He ran off, and Carl led the ladies down the street, pointing out various shops that the beasts liked. And then there is the second most important building in the entire town. Everyone stopped and looked in the direction of Carl's gesture. It was a cafe and bakery. Chapter 1835. The Drink Order. Ophelia was about to complain about Carl having led Lotus directly to caffeine, but she was already being dragged inside. For such a small creature, Lotus was exceptionally strong, and bonding with both Tifa and Tenna had made her even stronger. Now, she could even drag Ophelia down the street, as long as she could get the traction and Ophelia didn't pick her up. Rue and the Black Dragon Avatar turned to smile at each other. These two were going to be great entertainment, that was absolutely certain. So amusing, in fact, that the two of them had become nearly invisible in the chaos that surrounded the Darklight host's visit to the city. It was incredibly relaxing, though the Avatar had long since mastered the art of masking his aura in such a way that he didn't feel completely blank, only incredibly unremarkable to most. Most people didn't feel that he was a threat. He always felt just a bit weaker than them, but not so weak that he would feel like an easy target. It was a talent that Rue had never mastered or even seriously considered. Displaying your strength was the way to stay alive in most of the immortal world, and even the way that Carl muted his aura without making himself feel less powerful was an odd thing to her. She knew that his actual aura was absolutely monstrous, and everyone would give him a wide berth if he walked down the street, but instead, he just felt like the Carl, vaguely threatening to most things, but not enough to actively intimidate them. Even as they entered the cafe, it was Lotus who attracted the most attention. Partially because she was trying to steal Tifa back from Ophelia, but mostly because she had the loudest and most vibrant personality of the group. The staff knew instantly that this would be a valuable customer for them if she could convince her friends to let her have coffee on a regular basis. That seemed like it would be the hardest part, given how hyper she already was. "Can I get a raspberry mint latte, double shot of espresso, 2 lemon danishes, a cinnamon bun with raisins, and one of those chocolate brownies?" "Of course. Would anyone else like to order? We have pup cups of whipped cream for the ones who can't have caffeine." Ophelia snorted in amusement, but Tifa raised her paw. She didn't know how a cup of whipped cream was supposed to be special, but she was a big fan of it. Perhaps that was the reason? Did they know that bears liked whipped cream? "I'll take one of those lattes, with just a single shot, and Carl will have your fruit smoothie special of the month." "Then a half-dozen assorted pastries," Dana decided. Rue nodded. "We will have the same, with extra straws." "Bring me a black coffee. Extra large." Ophelia sighed, realizing that they were going to be here a while. The waitress smiled as she went to fetch their order, which would fill the large table with sweets. Her suspicion that the Green Dragon would be a good customer seemed to be completely justified. At least, that's what she assumed Lotus was. The priestesses took after their patrons, but she didn't have a priestess class, so the natural assumption was that she ended up that way because she was a green dragon. Lotus was practically bouncing in her seat, waiting for the good stuff to arrive, and the other patrons of the bakery had to struggle not to laugh at the happy songs she was making up, and at the spirit bear trying to sing along. Tenna had given up on trying to sing along with their songs. Neither of them sang in a tone that melded well with her voice. Instead, she was in an intense discussion with Leo about the various advantages to coming here to go to school. They basically boiled down to Leo had friends here, and he didn't know many of the other hatchlings. That wasn't an advantage for her, so Tenna wasn't planning to change, even if the Red Dragon matriarch of the orphanage scared her a little. It was better to be with her clutch mates and a scary teacher than to go to a school with all new people. Perhaps she could convince Leo to switch? He could float in the air, and that was basically flying without wings, so he should fit in with the dragons. The food and drinks came out quickly, and Lotus pivoted from excitement about her drink choice to what she was going to do next. There were so many options now that she was an immortal, and she had heard all about the fun things that Carl and Dana got to do, like going to immortal dungeons and exploring new places. That sounded like fun to her, and she would gladly drag everyone along. She had only forgotten one small thing. "Young Lotus, you must wait for your immortal spirit to be formed before you wander out into the wilderness, unless you want to risk permanent death. As much as you might want to run out and play, just like your daughters, you must wait until you grow up a little bit more before you can go play outside." Lotus frowned at the Black Dragon avatar as he finished his speech. "But that's so far away. I want to go out and play now." "How about you explore around town, where there are others to keep you safe, and then when you're properly into the spirit immortal stage, you can begin to expand your explorations. There is a lot to see, even in a clan like this. I bet that you didn't even know that they had over 200 different kinds of edible fish." Lotus and Tifa exchanged a shocked stare.
200 kinds
"Of fish." The Black Dragon avatar laughed. "I thought that you might appreciate that. I found that little tidbit when I was doing my research into the situation surrounding Carl. There are actually a few restaurants that specialize in serving all sorts of fish, but the best way is to go to the docks and see what is fresh." Lotus nodded. "What's the big deal with that anyhow? The Black Dragon avatars keep showing up to tell him that he can't have a dragon when he's technically got hundreds of them." The avatar smiled. "I suppose that we have time. Would you like the whole story or the abridged part that is directly relevant to Carl?" Chapter 1836. Don't give her ideas. Lotus didn't even hesitate before answering. "I need the whole story right from the start. Even if you have to go back to the foundation of the Pantheon, I will just ask the Green Dragon to fill in the details for me." "All right, then we will start with the backstory. Are you familiar with the species known as the Ancients?" Lotus shook her head. "Are you familiar with Carl's pet sitter spell? The creatures that it creates?" When Lotus nodded, he continued. "Those are a replica of the Ancients. They're a curious species, in that they didn't develop naturally. They were created by a pantheon of gods, known as the creators, to manage and develop the worlds that they were making in the mortal and immortal worlds. The ancients are the first species that most worlds see, the ones that create and place all other life on a planet, the very first ancestors of everything in existence, at least on the worlds that they helped create. However, the creators' pantheon is a relatively young pantheon by divine standards. Both the beast pantheon and the dragon pantheon were fully formed before the creators came into existence. Even the first human gods were born before them. The dragon gods have no issue with the creators making worlds, and even giving them systems so that the residents can grow more smoothly, without overuse of resources. The point of contention is their attitude. You see, the ancients view everything that they create as a form of pet, a plaything that exists under their care. But the pantheon of creators is one that believes in order through chaos. When all things are chaotic, random, and in flux, all things are in balance. That is how they manage their worlds. However, with that attitude comes a particular lack of moral relativity. If they restricted themselves, it would throw the worlds out of balance. So, they don't. One of the things that originally caused issues was that they would allow their ancients to populate worlds with dragons. Dragons born from outside of the purview of the pantheons. It is in a dragon's very genetic makeup to follow their patron. Yet, the ancients found a way to create them. Not a replica, not an imitation as many other spells might create, but real, living, breathing dragons with divine souls and a link to their deity. Then they raised them as pets. Much like Carl watches over the hatchlings in his tiny world, the ancients oversee entire worlds full of dragons who have the link to their gods, but no real connection, as they are not raised by the faithful. Already, Carl has managed to summon a lesser form of the Watchers, in the Pet Sitters. That is not possible for one with purely human bloodlines. Only one who has embraced the power of the ancients and embraced the divine balance of chaos could possibly use the spell. Carl frowned. Wait. Embrace the divine balance of chaos. My power matrix is based on the form of a chaos dragon, placed in 5 dimensions. Could that be what is shaping the direction that my power is growing? You made a 5-dimensional power matrix as an immortal? It was already based on the chaos dragon as immortal. I just altered it to be 5-dimensional when I was making my immortal spirit.
But yes.
The avatar sighed. The problem is worse than expected. But yes, that is likely part of what is changing your power and why the system doesn't recognize you as being part of any particular species. The chaos of your innate immortal soul is already twisting your presence into something that both must and must not exist. That is what an ancient is. They are not technically living things at all. They are the divine power of creation made manifest. Pure arcane energy, imbued with the spirit of the divine to emulate a living thing. In a way, they're almost a mana elemental, but a chaos element mana elemental. Lotus nodded slowly as the divine green dragon she was linked to explained more details for her. So, that's why they're not fluffy. The black dragon stared at her for a second. Yes, that is why they're not fluffy. Fluff is only one aspect of what makes a species appealing. They are not concerned with fluff because they can make fluff at will. Now it was Dana's turn to be stupefied. Was Lotus actually understanding this conversation on a deeper level than any of the rest of them? Or was she just fluff-obsessed? The tentacles are actually really soft when they want them to be. Tessa has them stop me from snacking before bed. Ophelia chuckled, and Lotus looked shocked. It was you. I knew it. They told me that it was Tessa, but it was you all along. And there hasn't been a cookie crumb in the bed for 2 weeks. Ophelia agreed. Betrayal. The black dragon avatar smiled at the lover's spat. It's the existence of the ancients and their nature as a chaotic force of neutral creation that has tilted the opinion of the black dragon against Carl. You see, most of the dragon gods just see more children when the ancients go wild and make another world full of dragons. But the black dragon has to clean up their mess and maintain the balance, while dealing with an entire species of creatures who create life at will, with no regard for balance, reason, or moderation. Dana gave the black avatar a sympathetic smile. That actually sounds a lot like Carl. If he had the power to simply create living creatures, there would be no stopping him. Exactly my point. Fortunately, that's unlikely to happen before he becomes a demigod. Even the legends rarely grasp the power of creation. In Carl's mind, Carl laughed hysterically. Wasn't that basically a challenge? If it wasn't impossible, then it was definitely a goal. Learn to create living things before reaching divinity. It could be his final partner, something completely unique, created entirely by the Carl as a proof of concept. It would be glorious. Chapter 1837. Probabilities. So, is it that the Black Dragon sees the potential for me to grow to the point where I could start simply creating my own dragons if I wanted one, or that he sees the potential for me to fully embrace the way of the ancients and just do as I please without regard for the implications?
Carl asked.
Don't forget that he can also see the past and future. So, it might be something that you're going to do if you get a dragon that has personally offended him before you ever thought of doing it, Kara added helpfully. The Black Dragon avatar sighed. You know, there is no good way to answer that because no matter which answer I give, it only encourages you to do the other, which will still lead to the same outcome, just in a different way. Divine inevitability. A point in the timeline that exists in almost all possible timelines that the Black Dragon is trying to steer this reality towards avoiding. The avatar stared at Carl. I am honestly shocked that you even understand the concept. But then, you did manage to make a fifth-dimensional power matrix, so it stands to reason that you understand more than a little bit about it. Carl shrugged. I also spend my days arguing logic with a chaos badger. Lotus giggled as she saw the expression on the dragon's face. That's mostly a joke. There is no logic involved in their arguments. I didn't imagine that there would be. And if the badger starts saying something that sounds logical, it's almost certainly a trap to lull you into complacency before she does something absolutely outrageous. Most chaos-based species are like that. Even the ancients are known to do it, though they usually treat it more like giving a pet treats before taking them to the vet or other unpleasant situation. Lotus looked scandalized again and pointed at Ophelia. You're in cahoots. I knew it. Every time they do something nice like bring me a latte, it's because there is work. You've been teaching them. Both Ophelia and the Black Dragon avatar laughed, and Ophelia shook her head. If anything, they've been teaching me new tricks. Did you know that they found a way to make a decaf latte taste exactly like a regular one? Lotus smiled at a memory and nodded. In fact, I did. Because the first time they tried it, they got it wrong, and every time after that I was suspicious. But their drinks are still really good, and I keep forgetting that they're bribes to trick me into doing things. The avatar laughed. If you think that your if not friend, why friend-shaped is powerful, you underestimate the power of the natural aura of the ancients. It's nearly impossible for people to go against their will, and they're all psychic to some level, so they're likely subconsciously steering you toward accepting their bribes and behaving. Ophelia winked at the immensely powerful dragon in disguise. Not that it's hard to bribe Lotus with coffee, even if it's decaf. The pastries were quickly disappearing, and the moment that Lotus' plate was clear, her hand was in the air, calling the staff over to order more. We are having story time. We need snacks. Say, another 12 assorted pastries, and I will take another latte. Of course, Mississippi. Ophelia sighed, knowing that there would be no concept of sleep tonight for Lotus. But since they had advanced, she felt much less motivation to sleep at all. So, perhaps it wouldn't be as big of an issue with letting Lotus have coffee, if her advanced constitution wasn't going to cause her to be sleep-deprived all the next day. That was one less thing to worry about. Lotus gazed longingly at the display of pastries, wanting all the recipes so that she could add them to her own kitchen repertoire, as these were obviously mystic cooking-produced goods. You couldn't just ask a pastry shop for their secret recipes, though. That would be tacky. So, she had to guess when they came out, using her experience to guide her next attempt to make new sweets. Plus, she still had questions. So, if that's the big issue, that Carl is too in tune with the ancients, why are they concerned about me having dragons as a beastmaster? I'm faithful to my goddess. I'm not an agent of chaos, and I'm not going to do bad things or mistreat them. She was practically pouting at the injustice now, and the Black Avatar smiled. We're just worried that the Carl and his patron deity might be a bad influence on you. I know you feel aggrieved, but when you've lived as long as I have, perspective changes a little. You're old? You don't feel old. The Avatar chuckled as he shifted to let the staff load more pastries onto the tables. Far more pastries than they had ordered, he noted. However, he didn't see himself getting out of story time with a green dragon cleric in under 2 hours. That would be practically a miracle once she got on a roll about all the other things that he knew. Still, he had plenty of patience, and watching the young get excited was entertainment in its own way. Lotus waved a half-eaten donut. You didn't answer. The Avatar chuckled. I'm a little over 20,000 years old. Actually, I think that I might have met Miss Rue when she was young. I can still feel the lingering energy of a divine battle's damage on her soul, and the battlefield feels familiar. Maybe 8,000 years ago? That sounds right. I would have been considered young for a leader of my faction then. But like so many others, I had seen more than enough combat to last a lifetime. That world was a mess, and I don't regret leaving after the battle. Rue sent a guild message. That means he was a demigod 8,000 years ago. Chapter 1838, 99 questions. That news got Lotus excited. That means you've seen countless immortal worlds, right? Are they all similar? Does every one of them do things a little bit different, or have different populations based on how they were made? Or do they kind of blend out to neutral after enough time? Do you know what I mean? Like in the mortal worlds, after 100,000 years of invasions, every region has its own peculiarities, but when you look at the larger picture across a continent or the whole world, the populations are actually pretty balanced, just segregated into their own faction territories. The Avatar shrugged. The immortal worlds are different. For one, not all of them are created and populated by gods. Many of them are simply private realms that were created by powerful legends and demigods in the past. Not always even the distant past. I was recently sent to one that was causing issues with constantly trying to steal souls from the underworld, only to find that it was some idiot of a legendary necromancer who thought that stealing souls from the underworld might be a functional path to divinity. Now, his world is only 100 years old, but it's fully populated with undead and essentially abandoned. Lotus nodded. The black dragon got cranky when you tried to steal from him. Even the green dragon clerics ran afoul of the black dragons now, and then because they would come up with new and inventive ways to revive people whose souls were already beginning to pass over. It didn't usually amount to much, as they had an agreement. But the black dragons would notice even a single resurrection, much less wholesale theft of souls that weren't being resurrected. Ooh, so like the tiny world on steroids? The Avatar laughed. Not exactly. If Carl was a legend, he could simply make the tiny world an actual planet in the immortal realms, either hidden away in a pocket dimension or open to be accessed by others. Even a world this size isn't an issue for a legend with a tiny world spell. So, the spell is misnamed? The dragon shrugged. That depends on your point of view. The divine worlds are an entire galaxy, created by the greater gods for their children. So, in contrast, even the largest planets are tiny. Even this one is 100 times larger than the one that you came from. This continent is about 15,000 kilometers across. And then there are the ones that aren't round at all. Some like to make them fun and unique, like disk worlds, where the world is flat and you really can fall off the edge. Lotus was fascinated. There are that many ways to make a world? Do you have a world? Even a pocket dimension has to count at your power level. The black dragon laughed. No, I was once a seeker for the black dragon, something like a mission specialist who goes out and takes care of tasks that their deity deems important. Now I'm an avatar, more of a political representative. Between the two, I never had the need to form a world of my own. But since you're still curious, I will give you a fun fact. While you started as a cleric and became a beast master, I actually started as a necromancer and became a priest later. There was a time, back in my youth as an immortal whelp, when I would go into dungeons with 1,000 skeletal warriors on my side. A memory flashed in Carl's mind of a spell combination that nobody could use when they were still mortals. Something like the Army of Unholy Retribution? He asked. Oh, that is a fun spell. But when I was young, I didn't have any such powerful minions, just skeletons. So many skeletons gleaned from the battlefields. So I mostly used Undead Horde, which increases the damage done by my undead minions by 1% for every minion that I control. It's a nightmare on the mental load, since you need to actually control all those undead, but it was an excellent power-building exercise, and I developed my power matrix in near record time. Lotus nodded in understanding. Our friend Ray loves her spectral knights, and these super cute Lich Lord skeletons. The Black Dragon laughed. Lich Lords are cute? Lotus nodded. You should see them in combat. Waving their hands around to make grand dramatic spell effects, and then hovering near her shoulder begging for praise. If she wasn't a green dragon, he would assume there was something very wrong with her brain. But Carl was nodding. The Lich Lords do love to be praised. Lady Ray uses Army of the Dead, Queen of the Damned for blood golems and undead minions in combat together. It really is an effective combination to back up a blood destruction spider. The Avatar nodded. Queen of the Damned is a popular one among many of the spider goddess followers. They have a particular love for making things explode in the most gruesome ways. Ray definitely wouldn't deny that. Are we going to teach Ray a new summoning spell? She can be the undead queen the way that Dana is the golem mistress. Can spiders be necromancers? They're not technically death element, right? The Black Dragon shrugged. There is no rule against it. Normally, they don't gain system access. The spider goddess views it as cheating. But there is nothing in their nature that would stop them from learning necromantic magic if they were powerful enough. Is Lady Ray the one who is running the clothing store near your guild house? I can sense her presence, as well as her odd shopkeepers.
Carl laughed.
That's partially my fault. The combination of constructs and illusion magic with reality warp makes for too effective of a shop environment. So, I helped her make the priestesses for her clothing store. I actually meant that half-elf mage with bloodline soul sight. That's a rare combination, and she's a bit of an odd one. I think she might actually be training that girl to become a spider mage. You should probably stop letting her name things if she named her assistant girl, by the way. Spider mage. Lotus asked eagerly, ignoring the dig at Maish's name. After all, they weren't the ones who named her. A servant of the spider goddess. A summoning-type mage who calls on spiders to do their bidding. They're not quite a cleric class, but close to it. Quite rare, actually. At least, if you're not a pure-blooded dark elf. Chapter 1839. Black Avatars Abound. The Black Dragon Avatar's estimation of how long it would take them to get out of the coffee shop was only cut short because Ophelia finally got tired of sitting on the hard chairs and decided to change venues. She stood, picked up Lotus and Tifa, and bowed to the Avatar. No offense intended, but can we do this somewhere more comfortable? I would rather not sit 12 straight hours on a wooden chair, and I know that Lotus has at least that many more questions for you. If you've been assigned to make sure that she's not being unduly influenced by Carl and the World Dragon, I'm afraid that you can't escape them. The Black Dragon chuckled. Well, since that's how it is, why don't we return to her apartment? I would assume there are snacks and comfortable seating there. We haven't set it up yet. We were assigned rooms next to Carl's, but we were intending to remain in the tiny world. You could join us there if it's not an imposition. The Avatar shrugged. If it's comfortable, it's fine by me. Carl was initially hesitant, but it was an avatar of the Black Dragon. If there was one universal fact about the avatars, it was that none of them were genuinely shitty people. So, the chances that any of them would steal his tiny world, or its contents, seemed very low. Even if this one wasn't a demigod who didn't need anything that Carl might have, except for Ewan. Carl had sent the little Black Dragon home after ice cream, so he didn't get in trouble. But if they were going to be in the tiny world, he would surely come searching for Tenna in under an hour. Those two were inseparable. Sure enough, the presence of the Avatar brought both Ewan and Naksha over, the moment that they were all in the tiny world. For a Black Dragon, that aura was unmistakable, and in Naksha's estimation, Carl must have gotten himself in trouble again if they were sending avatars to come check on the tiny world directly. That wasn't usually necessary, as she was here, and she could relay the situation to them. But this one felt incredibly powerful, despite his restrained aura. Avatar, welcome. Would you like for me to arrange rooms for you? Naksha greeted the Avatar as Yuan launched himself at Tenna to explain everything that had happened since she left, and to get all the updates on what she did. He would be incredibly envious when he found out that she got an extra snack. The Avatar smiled at Naksha. It's a pleasure to meet you, Black Dragon, who has joined the Darklight host. Naksha chuckled. You say that as if I have forgotten the goddess. The two aren't mutually exclusive. You just have to get used to a certain level of unexpected developments if you're going to be around these people long enough. I must say, though, that raising a hatchling is much more trouble than I had expected. I see why this task is delegated to the Red Dragons. The Avatar turned his attention to where Yuan was intently listening to the detailed story of Tenna's adventures in the outside world. He was clearly enthralled with the concept of getting to go out and do things away from the orphanage, especially with Lotus, who always had fun ideas. It takes a few years before they begin to calm down. But it seems that one is particularly energetic. Is the escaping sort? You have no idea. The day he hatched, he was already trying to escape from the nest to explore all the auras that he could sense. The Avatar looked briefly at Carl, then back at Naksha. I can see how that would attract a hatchling. Dungeon teams often have a particular problem shaking off black hatchlings, since they always feel like death energy, so the little ones treat them like big siblings who should be obliged to answer all the questions they have about the outside world. Naksha laughed. That doesn't just apply to Carl and the others who go to the dungeons. Yuan has questions. All the questions. Yuan looked over and nodded. I just don't know enough things yet. Once I know more things, I will be able to answer more of the questions. That sounded reasonable, but Naksha suspected that not even the blue dragons memorized enough things to answer all his questions. The little black dragon was an odd one, and she definitely didn't remember being that curious as a youngster. But then, she didn't have such an understanding group of people around, so she got told to shut up much more often. Maybe this was just how young dragons were when they were solo and exploration-minded? That others would get their answers from being in a group and hearing the others ask, so they seemed individually less curious. Yuan just had an entirely different set of questions than anyone else did. So, he went to find people other than the orphanage staff to ask his questions to. Plus, he liked just being alone. Or with Tenna. Since he didn't count Tenna as an outsider, she was more a two-step verification for whether ideas would be fun. If they both agreed, then it had to be a good idea. Once they caught up on the events of the last few hours, Yuan flew over to the Avatar. Hi, I'm Yuan. Do you know why both spirit and lightning magic taste cold, like mint ice cream? The Avatar chuckled. Actually, I do. Come sit here, and I will explain many things to you. Yuan cheered, and Tenna came to sit on the other side of the Avatar. She also wanted to know the answer to this question, and whether the Avatar thought that berries or chocolate were better with mint ice cream. These were important questions. The Avatar winked at Naksha. You might as well get comfortable. I need to talk to you once I finish with the little ones. That could be a while. Chapter 1840. Grill the Avatar. While the black dragons were distracted, Rue pulled Carl aside. We should catch up on crafting some immortal-grade items for the store before he wants us for something. They're selling out of everything at an incredible rate now that the word is spreading, and more of the challenges have happened. Good point. We should make duplicates of everything. Just mass-produce the most popular bribes at rare and epic grade, then make a couple of peerless grade items at the end of the day. Rue laughed. Don't you have a skill to upgrade all the items by a grade anyhow? Oh, good point. I can just breath of the world on some of the epic grade items at the end of the day to come up with random items instead of putting in the work to make actual peerless grade items from scratch. We're not using them anyhow, so it's not like they have to be tailored to a particular skill. The dragon nodded. So, let's make a load of items at epic grade first. I will do caster, you do warrior, and then you can upgrade a handful, while we ship the rest to the store to be sold as the high-end bribes. The werewolves can take care of the rare grade stuff, they're getting pretty good at it already, and their speed is increasing. Plus, there are more of them. They moved away from the group a little and got right to work. The black dragon Avatar would sense them even if they try to hide away somewhere, so there was no point in going anywhere. If they worked off to the side here, they could still answer questions when necessary. And while Yuan was taking up most of the conversation, the avatars still did have some questions for them and Lotus. This space, what was your plan for it? Carl shrugged. Mostly it's a place for my people to live now, but I actually started it as a space for the beasts to relax and to grow the magical plants that they needed. There are some animals here as well, but strictly within a balanced ecosystem, as they're essentially livestock. For example, the fish in the lake. We limit how many the hatchlings can hunt on their own, but they're often included in the meals. It cuts down on how much we have to go out and gather or hunt. If we had to hunt meat for so many hatchlings, it would be a nightmare. But with the tiny world, we've got more than enough. We also have many rare alchemy resources here, plants that Thor likes to eat, and a number of other valuable resources, plus the extra energy to help the dragons grow. The Avatar nodded. You did a fine job with that. Far better than most, actually. Most attempts at a tiny world are either incomplete or closer to a mortal world in energy density. Enough to survive within, but not nearly enough for anything to really thrive. I don't suppose that you have mana manipulation as one of your partially understood fundamental rules. I've fully comprehended mana manipulation, and I'm very close on both chaos and fire. The dragon looked impressed. I wouldn't have expected you to do so well with fire. Is it caused by feedback from the phoenix? Carl nodded. Hawk has been with me longer than anyone, and we understand each other very well. I understand a bit of all the rules that the beasts mastered to get to immortality, but Hawk didn't start out as innately fire element, so I learned it as he did, without the innate understanding that the others skipped. It led to a more complete understanding of the rule than most. I see. That makes sense when I have the context. However, it is somewhat startling that you managed to fully understand the rule of mana manipulation. It's not one of the easy ones to understand, and is generally considered a third-tier rule. Third tier. The Avatar nodded. There are basically three types of rules. Fragmented rules, which are situational, or part of a larger rule. Primary rules, which are major elemental rules and core concepts of sentient beings. Then the core rules. Life, death, mana, and divinity. Most immortals will struggle to even touch on one of them if they're not innately aligned to them. Take your little fox. He understands a portion of the rule of divinity, as he is a divine beast by birth. Though, that is different than understanding divinity itself. And the black dragons will innately understand the fundamental rule of death. But most others will pick a simpler rule to understand. The Naga in the alchemy lab understood the fundamental rule of transformation, an alchemy-related rule. It's one of the second-tier rules, as transformation is an overarching rule which is involved in many others. So many will understand a bit of it, but not all. Then there are the first-tier rules like pain, powerful within their own range. However, not all species can feel pain, and pain itself is usually only part of a larger process. It's still a fundamental rule, but not on the same level of influence over the world. At the immortal rank, the choice makes very little difference, unless your lifestyle doesn't suit the rule that you have understood. The spider would struggle to live in a world where she was surrounded by slimes, which do not feel or understand pain. She would be bored half to death. So, picking a rule that directly impacts your life is much more important than one that has the higher ranking or the most influence on creation. That level of optimization will help you grow much more quickly within your own chosen path. That's where so many of these idiots in the training sects fail. They all learn the same thing and don't consider that it might not be the best option for themselves. It's just the only one that they have access to, so they try to make it fit. I suppose if you don't truly understand what you're doing, you just have to pick whatever has the most available information. And you do understand? Rue asked curiously. I have lived in the divine realm for quite some time now. You can't compare the access to information there to what you can access in the immortal realms.